Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Uncertified Forgotten. We are your favorite horror film podcast with 10 or fewer reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. If you tell us there is another one, give us their name so we can fuck them up. So we can West Side Story fight them in the streets with our Horror Hound movie guides and our letterboxed accounts, because that's how we fight as film folks. We are, as we always say, but probably not as often as we should, we are bringing you the films that are certified forgotten. Some films are certified fresh. Some films are certified rotten. Our films are certified forgotten. But sometimes there's a new movie coming out. There's a VOD release that we're really excited about. There's a film that we want to talk about that falls well the fuck outside of our criteria. And today is going to be a spoiler-free conversation about 28 years later. It's going to be especially spoiler-free because I haven't seen it. And if Matthew ruins this movie for me, I will fly to Los Angeles and punch him in the face. As soon as I say that, I realize it was a bad idea because all he heard was Monica will fly to Los Angeles.
I have my way of bringing you to me finally. No, you
Correct.
you have plenty of travel coming up with your life move happening, so I'm not going to make you come to one of your least favorite places on earth.
I appreciate that. So I'm excited. We'll talk about excitement for this film. You and I had a couple of exchanges already about why you think it's a particularly good Monagle movie, why the stuff that I like about the filmmakers leans maybe more into my sensibilities than yours. That's exciting to discuss. But I want to say I watched 28 Days Later for the first time, God, since probably like definitely since the 2010s, maybe even earlier, with you, because you were passing through for a festival. I think it was South by Southwest this year. And we were doing a podcast recording or something, and you happened to have a bunch of DVDs on the shelf in your family home in New Jersey. And I said, "Oh, do you still have a copy of 28 Days Later? Because I've been telling Andrea she needs to watch this." And we're like, "Funny enough, I do." So the last time that I watched 28 Days Later was with you and Andrea in our living room while you were visiting. And I have to say, I feel like I'm watching a lot of people rediscover that film right now for the first time in a decade because of the complicated streaming rights issues that it's had. It holds the fuck up. Like that is a film that I think it has fallen outside of the spotlight because so much of our conversations are about what's available on streaming. This movie, I think, is going to redominate pop culture and how we talk about 2000s horror for a long time to come, now that it's easily accessible.
Yeah, I want to make sure the details are right on how we watched 28 Days Later, because we actually watched it on Halloween. If you remember correctly,
Halloween. That's right.
It was Halloween because we were at Brooklyn Horror Fest together. I had a wedding in between Brooklyn Horror Fest, so I went to that wedding, immediately got COVID. I sat in a hotel in Brooklyn, and then I went back to my parents' house and sat in the basement quarantining away from them. And I had to go to Austin anyway the following week for another wedding. And you so graciously were like, come in a day or two early so the flights aren't too bad. You can stay with me. So I'm literally just sitting in my parents' basement with COVID going like, I need to be okay to get to this wedding. Holy shit, am I going to make it? So tested negative literally the day before the flight, grabbed 28 days and 28 weeks and came out to Austin and watched it with you and Andrea. And it was a nice little memory and a fun little way to spend Halloween as you gave out candy to trick-or-treaters in your little neighborhood and had this gory as hell zombie movie. Well, terrifying as hell. I won't say gory as hell.
Terrifying as hell.
Terrifying as hell is more of it. It's a lot of gnashing and blood, but not too much of the Romero-esque ripping out of intestines.
It was fun to submit you to the fully suburban Halloween because you don't go back for major holidays. You don't always get an opportunity to go back. And even I feel like so much of what you do around the holidays is structured around festivals and or Halloween horror nights and or a million other things that you have going on. So I have to imagine that was the first time in a while where you were in a house where like kids were coming up and getting candy. And it was just like exactly the kind of childhood shit that we remember when we used to go door to door with some changes for the parents out there. As you know, Halloween and trick-or-treating takes on a very different flavor in 2025. There's no more sending your kids down a dark road by themselves to ring a doorbell. Now everything's kind of in the driveway. It's a much cooler process.
Yeah, I mean, my mom in our suburban town that, my parents still live in and where I grew up in, that was trick-or-treating for us was us going out as kids all dressed up and like no parents, no nothing. We were running around the town like idiots. That was what we did. But I think everything kind of changed post-lockdown where they did the trunk or treat in my town. So you go into a park and everyone brings candy and puts it in their trunk, and the kids can do it easily there. But I think that kind of stuck on, if what my mom is telling me is like true, at least in our suburban Jersey town, where the culture just doesn't exist anymore, where kids go out by
Yeah.
themselves and do it no matter of any age. It's really dipped off. And my mom always overbought candy, even when, it was okay to do what we did. But now, especially, she's like, I just have buckets of candy for me, which she loves because she eats it all throughout until Christmas, basically.
Yeah, I like that. But yes, in between trick or treaters, kids that were polite and some kids that were not so polite. They're youngins. Doesn't matter. Um, we watched 28 Days Later. So I in the last newsletter that we sent out, I did a write up of my memory of 28 Days Later, because it was it's something that I carry close to my heart, which was working at a small town movie theater, having and it's the seismic effect that this had on horror, not just in the fact that we switched from slow to fast zombies, but also this being one of the big breakthrough, digital video films to fill up the big screen. It did feel, it isn't often, I think, that you see something in theaters and you feel like you're watching a paradigm shift. 28 Days Later felt like a paradigm shift when you watched it in theaters. And I wrote about that experience and the fact that I used to fuck with the audio in the theater, not out of in unsafe ranges, but I would tweak the audio a little bit here and there, especially during the John Murphy House in a Heartbeat piece, because I really wanted that to be overwhelming and overstimulating for the viewers. And all of that is still there. The Brendan Gleeson arc, still sad as fuck. The um, entirety of the Cillian Murphy House in a Heartbeat scene, that is still, all these years later, maybe one of the most intense, what is it, 5-7 minutes of horror movies that are available to us. Like that is still the sort of thing that like lifts your shoulders up and then just keeps you in that stress spot for the duration. It's wonderful, remarkable filmmaking.
I'm trying to think of like when I saw it the first time. It had to be college because, as I've dove into many times on this podcast, I was a latecomer to horror.
Mm-hmm.
And this, 28 Days Later was 2002, right on the cusp of the 2000s. It's, as you said, very influential on zombie cinema, even though it is an infected movie. And we'll get there because I think there were times where I would argue it goes both ways, but 28 years later absolutely plants a flag, and these are not fucking zombies. But again, we'll get there. So 28 Days Later, I forgot how the digital camcorder aesthetic made it so grainy and dirty and grimy, and that's a good thing in the terms of the filmmaking because it makes it feel more dystopian.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to have seen it in college. It had to be one of those like, well, let's sit down and watch it. But like I had the DVD, so that was one that I saw immediately, grabbed off the shelf, and added to my collection because Outbreak cinema just doesn't do it for me all the time either. Any of those contagion kind of, oh, the outbreak is spreading through the city, blah, blah, blah. Like sometimes they're slower, sometimes they're this and that. I think what Danny Boyle does in 28 Days Later is so goddamn intense. You're following Cillian Murphy the whole time, and it is that one arc journey that doesn't get sidetracked like a Walking Dead episode. I mean, it has the humanity in there. It has the who are the real monsters, the infected or the military, stuff like that. The commentary is really in your face, but the pace is relentless. Boyle finds a way to keep pushing forward with this ferocity and the way that the infected move and the way they sprint. It's all just so fucking good. And yeah, I mean, Dawn of the Dead, right there 2 years after, between 28 and Dawn of the Dead, slow moving zombies weren't the thing anymore. They weren't scary anymore because we've had things that, all right, I can speed walk away from a Romero zombie, sure, whatever.
Right.
Hordes, don't get me wrong, you get caught in a horde, you're fucked. Like that is terrifying, and that is a special kind of terrifying because it does take longer because they're moving slower and you have to like sit with that. No, 28 days later, like you just see them sprinting after you, and that unlocked a brand new kind of, ooh, that's scary. Ooh, that's really scary because I can run, but these things run and they apparently don't run out of steam. So I run out of steam eventually.
Right. Yeah, and it is a I think we've talked enough about it. I feel like you're definitely the day after rather than the day before, right? And I think I actually fall a little bit more on the day before in terms of like you would rather watch the fall like the fallout of the fallout, where I like the dystopian collapse to get to that point. I like watching systems fail in real time to get to the point of disaster. Is that a fair read?
I mean, it's a fair read. You know, I like action more. You know, I like a
Hmm.
little bit more fast paced and explosive. But we'll revisit when I start talking about 28
Okay.
years.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense. Although ironically, I think I like Train to Busan 2 more than I like Train to Busan, which is a weird thing to say. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree.
With me, not a hot. I mean, liking it more, hot take. But I think
Spicy, mildly spicy.
they're both fantastic.
Yeah.
I really like the second one, and I'm surprised it did as poorly as it did with the general audience because there really wasn't a lot of hubbub about that one, and I really
Hmm.
liked it.
Yeah, maybe I should write about that. I wish I had a website I could write for. Oh, hold on, I think I do. But let's talk about 28 years later, because I have been, when a big film that I'm excited to see comes out, because I tend not to watch stuff at press screenings. Just not my vibe a lot of the time. I usually commit movies to friends. I usually don't have coverage lined up ahead of time, so I'm just sort of like, well, I'll do this the social way rather than the professional or the career way. So I'm going to see this on the other side of this weekend, and I am very excited for it. I feel like I've been waiting a long time about it. Been kind of keeping an eye on the buzz that folks have said. They're using a lot of words that I like, which is bonkers, over the top. Big swings is always something that's going to get my butt in the seat. And I've also read a little bit of the interviews and coverage that Alex Garland and Danny Boyle have done. I don't typically do that. I usually shy away from that. But I have been curious about sort of the timeline and where 28 days later, 28 weeks later fits into this. My understanding going into this, and again with no spoilers, is that this isn't a Neil Blomkamp type situation. This isn't Halloween, David Gordon Green type thing. It's not like they're saying the second film doesn't exist. They're just kind of saying we're more interested in what we were doing with the first movie and kind of building that out. So like the second film is there, but we're not going to confirm nor deny its relevance to the whole thing. Is it even canonical in the sense that like do they address it?
I mean, it happened. But
Okay.
you go 28 days, 28 weeks. We're not 28 years. Like, sure, that happened, but it's not relevant anymore. It's not a thing that
Right.
has to be addressed. So Boyle did confirm in interviews, yes, 28, the sequel did happen, but 28 years. Somebody asked me online, like, do I need to watch 28 weeks? I'm like, nah, you're fucking fine. Like 28 years is 28 years later. Shit's
Yeah.
different. Don't worry.
And I love, it's so odd to me. And I was talking about this actually with Andrew on the car ride home this afternoon from running errands. It is so surprising to me that the studio greenlit this, because I feel like the modern movie studio is so risk averse. It's about betting on a sure thing as much as possible, and because 28 Days Later has been outside of the zeitgeist, not available on streamers, doesn't have any of kind of like the quantitative data that a lot of studios will look for to decide yes this no that. It feels, and because Danny Boyle has moved on and Alex Garland has moved on, and it's not like they're hurting for work or attention or coverage. I mean, gosh, Garland has had two films in the last 2 years that have been huge talking points and very, very successful and blah, blah, blah. And Danny Boyle's Danny Boyle. It's such part of the thing that excites me for 28 years later is the fact that this didn't need to happen. There wasn't anybody pressuring for a sequel. It's not like these two filmmakers needed to return to a previous property in order to like kickstart a career or to get an extra paycheck. Like everybody's doing fine. Nobody was asking for it. And it's that specific needle that Boyle and Garland felt like they had unfinished business that makes me a little bit more excited to see this than I would be if it was like, oh, we the franchise, we wanted to continue it. They were like, no, we kind of wanted to, we were looking back. And I saw an interview with Boyle where he was like, he sees it like every 2 years, 28 days later, he'll go to like a screening. And every time he watches it, he's like, holy shit, this is actually really good. That's the energy I want in the new movie.
It definitely has we haven't played with these toys in a while, and this is exciting that we get to go back into the sandbox feel. 28 weeks, famously not them too. So
Right.
the idea that they did 28 days and the studio wanted a sequel and went ahead without them and just did it. It happens. It's Hollywood. Can't really do anything about it, but there is a vitality to 28 years later that you're probably going to love or hate if you are listening to this. I think that is the first thing I'll say. Big swings, everything you said, bonkers. Oh yeah, there are a lot of elements introduced. I'm trying to say this correctly because we're going no spoilers. I don't want to give anything away, but 28 years later is so clearly the beginning of a trilogy. And I say that with a little bit of criticism in my voice as well, because they are setting up 3 movies worth of talking points and characters and all these things. But that becomes a problem in a single film. We know already Nia DaCosta's filmed the second one. If we believe Aaron Taylor Johnson, that's done already. So that movie is already going to happen. We know. So we have,
and there's a spin-off being made just with Ray Fiennes' character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like things are happening. We will get more of all these characters that have been introduced, but I think the Ray Fiennes is a great example because sure as hell he's in 28 years later, but it feels like we don't get enough time with him, and that is frustrating. And who we do get enough time with feels like it should have been a larger arc. And Aaron Taylor Johnson's there, then he's not, but we're going to find out more about that later. There's a lot of, hey, here are parts of arcs, or let me put it this way. The way I said it in my review is like, it feels like there's a lot of planting seeds, but none of them are watered enough. We just plant the seeds and leave them there, and we know that they're going to grow eventually, but they're not really nurtured all that well. So that is my problem narratively. But that said, fucking what they go for, holy shit. Yeah. At parts, this feels like a perfect return to the grit and grime that we described of the digital camcorder cinematography in 28 Days Later, replicated famously with about 20 iPhones on a rig, which is crazy. It's a wild shot to look at, just 20 iPhones attached to this circular kind of rig, so it gets you all the perspectives. I believe they had a 10 iPhone unit and also an 8 iPhone, so they had different versions of it. But it does get you back to that kind of grainy, almost home video kind of shooting that feels like you're watching somebody's footage of what happened. The problem with that is it can get very chaotic and very choppy and very cut, because we have all these cuts we can use, so why not use as many as we can? And I say this seriously, it feels like a video game movie, but it feels like a video game movie made by Boyle, like fucking House of the Dead.
Ouch.
And
that's a hard, that there is no positive spin on that. As somebody who saw House of the Dead in theaters, that's a hard thing to polish up.
Yeah, like the kill sequence is literally, I was like, hey, wait, this already happened in House of the Dead. We already had this. But they're cool, but they're also not fitting with the other half of the movie that is fucking stunning and so beautifully captured by the director of photography, whose name is escaping me, but returning as well from 28 Days Later. So it's a real reunion for a lot of different people. But I really want to call out the idea that this movie feels so in tune with 28 Days Later at points, and then it feels so antithetical, whatever the fucking word is. I don't know. My brain is much right now.
Yeah, you're good.
Antithetical. Jesus Christ. So it feels
the
like
opposite. It feels like the big opposite of.
Right. It feels like the opposite in so many ways because it doesn't really want to engage with the horror. And I don't mean that it's not scary. I don't want to drive people away from like thinking that it's like Danny Boyle doesn't want to make a horror movie. He just wants to engage with what you said before. We're 28 years later. So how do we play with, well, where are the infected at this point? Like, what have they evolved into? Or what are we doing with like communities and people and survivors? And all of that stuff feels very The Walking Dead-ish in a way, but with Alex Garland's eye for it all. And I know he wrote the screenplay, so obviously it's going to be in his tone of voice. But at the same time, the cinematography really makes me think of, well, honestly, like it makes me think of Civil War. Like I think this movie feels at times like Civil War with Infected, because it is largely a son going out on adventures in the mainland, which is quarantined, the UK, and whether he's with his father or with his mother, there are just these sprawling shots of just landscapes and all these, the Civil War cinematography, like everything I think about is just sprawling shots of America and these backdrops and how beautiful they are. Like, God, the Bone Temple, when they get there, the Bone Temple is like, it's something that will be relevant in other movies, obviously, but we don't spend that much time here in the first one. And it's so fucking cool. The the production design did a fantastic job building it. And there's just one just amazing shot overhead. It's nighttime, the Bone Temple, there's something's on fire, and like embers are just swirling in a circle as you're looking down. And it's just goddamn stunning, but it doesn't feel like 28 days at all.
Mm.
So there's this weird juxtaposition of like, it is absolutely a 28 movie, and yet it's doing everything it can not to be a 28 movie. And it jarring with each other, going back and forth. Like, that was my struggle with it. And my struggle with like is jumping between characters and trying to find this tonal through point and trying to find like a visual through point. Everything is interesting. Everything is captivating, but it feels like different movies at times. And I just didn't know which way it was going half the time. And I would honestly rather they released both movies they'd filmed now together. So we got all of it. Or sorry, I shouldn't even say all of it. So we got a lot of the story they were setting up.
Correct.
And also the payoff. So that's my longer 2 cents on it without getting anywhere deeper, because if I got deeper, it would reveal things. But I want to keep some mystery for the listeners.
Sure. Yeah, and the way you describe it, I mean, it's a joke, but it's the Simpsons, the Shop of Curios thing, right? Like, it looks like it's an Alex Garland film. That's good, but the fight scenes look like they're the House of the Dead. That's bad. It definitely, but like, I love a mixed bag. Oh my god, I love a mixed bag so much. Like, I want something that risks. I always say this: risks being bad in order to be great. And it would be interesting. A smarter person than me, and someone who's watched 28 Days Later more recently than me, would probably do well to kind of understand or to compare the two. It sounds like you could almost write a piece which is comparing what the original 28 Days Later was trying to separate itself from aesthetically and production wise in its digital first approach, and what 28 years later is trying to reestablish as a more cinematic approach when it comes to like the proliferation of SFX and digital and all of that. Like, they do feel like they are, the way you describe it makes me feel like both films are as much in conversation with the state of the industry and what we're used to seeing on screen as they are what is the, the through line or the production design and aesthetic of this specific franchise.
Yeah, and I'll use a trailer shot too, just as one of my favorite examples, because we go from a chase scene in the mainland between again, father and son, and we're getting a lot of those first perspective shots that I talked about, the iPhone shots, and it's very jumpy and very bobbly and all this stuff. And then they reach a causeway, which is just a nice little lifted piece of land on a large sea mass, and it's not untraversable. So like, it's up to their shins at this point, and that is their only way home. The only way back to safety on an island where there are barricades and a community is to sprint across this causeway, and there's an alpha zombie behind them, which I fun evolution. There are alphas now, there are hordes, there's a hierarchy for the infected.
Sounds very Left 4 Dead in its approach to zombies.
Yup, there you go. Keep the video game stuff going. But as they're running across it, listen, UK's gone, it's quarantine zone. There's nothing electric, there's nothing any of that stuff. So you can see just this beautiful starry sky, and there's this aurora borealis effect going on, and there's these neon colors flickering, and it's a trailer shot, and like, it's one of the shots that I'm watching the trailer going, I don't know what to expect from this movie, because this shit looks like Mad Max. It looks like when they're in one of the areas and it's just that purple sky and all this stuff. Like, it looked visually stunning, and it does. And it's such a good shot, them just sprinting across this mirror lake or mirror body of water, their feet splashing, the alpha just fucking trucking behind them. It is so cool. And then you just kind of like, the next scene just jumps again, where we have a new thing to think about. There are subplots with, there's cheating involved. Garland like pulls in from every one of his movies that he's made so far. Like, as much as I see Civil War in this movie, I see Men in the way themes are handled. I see Ex Machina in certain ways narratively. So it feels like he's cherry picking things he likes from his other movies and putting them in the script. But I'm also going to say things like Tracksuit Mafia and like The Warriors is more of a comparison point at times than 28 Days Later is. The Lost World Jurassic Park is more of a comparison at times than 28 Days Later.
Okay.
And I'm saying these things, and I know you probably have no idea how to interpret that. No, there are not dinosaurs in 28 years
Zombie
later.
dinosaurs?
Zombie
Are we hanging
dinosaurs.
zombie dinosaur dong in this movie?
Oh, there is dong.
I know, I know,
Let
I
there
know.
be dong. There
That
is
has
plenty of
been
that.
the primary reaction of most people. Um, yeah, a lot of
But
nudity.
anyway, so like in saying all that, I want to convey how wild 28 years can get and how I think that's a great thing. And that also gets in performances too. Do not get me wrong. Like Aaron Taylor Johnson is doing, I think, what he is meant to do. He's playing a father character. He is playing a scavenger. He is very boisterous and he's very confident and he's training his son. So there is a great dynamic there in trying to figure out masculinity in this uncertain time. Jodie Comer is playing mom in this scenario. So you get arcs between father son and you get arcs between mother son, and they're separate arcs, and they're basically 2 acts in the movie. And then they meet Dr. Kelson at one point, who is a hermit doctor. I won't go deeper than that. Played by Mr. Fiennes, and he feels more like, I'm gonna bring up, oh man, Dead Rising. He feels more like a Dead Rising side character, in that you
Nice.
meet him and you're just like, oh, this guy's, yeah, this is a good role for Mr. Fiennes. It's very good.
And he got to stay in his Odysseus shape, right? From isn't he put on all of that muscle to do that Odyssey adaptation, and he got to keep it all for the 28 movie.
So you get these, but once again, I go back to the idea of one of those arcs to me works incredibly well. One of those arcs feels undercut. And it's the comparison of, once again, I wish I had more time with the one I love. I wish I had less time with the one I feel like would have been better served for its own movie, maybe like a prequel or something like that. Like there are just so many puzzle pieces shoved into place in this first one, and yet the puzzle is still so incomplete. It's really hard to look at this as a critic for me and go, I appreciate and I respect so much of what's going on here, but structurally it just doesn't have everything I want. And I know it'll get there. Like I do trust Garland and Boyle. I think that is something I should say. And I enjoy a lot of both of their movies, whether they are working together or separately. But right now it feels like they just kind of put their cards on the table and half of them haven't been turned over yet. And you're just looking at random numbers going, okay, this could be something. This could be something great. I don't know yet though. And that is, to me, that's a problem if you're starting a trilogy. You should be able just to deliver that first movie, get me hooked and go, cool. Can't wait to see what the next one's going to do, like where we're going to go. This, it ends in a weird place. It could have ended earlier. It could have went later. There's just so much of that conversation to be had with 28 years later.
All right. Well, last question for you before we wrap then. You're talking about a movie that is the beginning of a series of films that is tonally inconsistent. Whether that's a complimentary or pejorative is up to the viewer. Has a bunch of sort of disparate storylines that are going to be followed in varying degrees of importance across multiple films. So where my mind goes, 60 seconds or less, should it have been a TV show in the current state of prestige television? Or do you think that it justifies, we would rather, you and I would have always rather watch something in a movie theater, no questions asked. But for long form storytelling, would you have rather seen this be a more episodic, a limited series, 8 episodes or something to get those big ideas across?
I'm going to use Alita Battle Angel as a quick comparison point. And I'm not, listen,
Okay.
I do not like Alita Battle Angel.
I kind of do. It's cool.
It has its defenders.
Yeah,
Harry yells at me all the time for it. Like I know they exist, but I'm using Alita Battle Angel because when I saw that movie, I'm like, oh, you are a fucking origin story and you think you're going to get more movies. And that is not probably going to happen based on what I just saw. Where with 28 years later, there is enough for me to grab onto to say, I'm here, I'm with you, but you have to prove it now. So to answer your question in that way, if they stick the landing, it doesn't matter. So they've got 2 more movies. They have 1 more movie definitely and another one probably happening to stick the landing. But if they did hold it for an entire television run, and especially if they dropped it all at the same time, at this point, I'm more inclined to say I would have preferred that, because where we are right now, I want more, but also what I've got the questions are more frustrating than the answers I'm waiting for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it feels like it feels like it's fighting the form a little bit, where to give you more would mean it wouldn't work as a film in the way that a film is set up within a single film. You can't have a 3-hour movie, right? So, okay, well, that sounds, for someone like me, a wonderful night at the cinema. What you are describing, the Alex Garland-ness of it all, the inconsistencies, the big ideas, like, this is where I show up for films. This is why I see things like Battle Los Angeles in theaters, is just because I want like big, huge fucking swings. The worst thing that a film can do is just be boring. And if nothing else, this movie's not going to be boring. So I remain hopeful that 28 years later is going to be one of those messes that just sits completely right with me. That's it. That is our episode on 28 years later. Stay tuned for my tweets after, or skeets, or whatever we're calling them now, after I see it this weekend. But of course, Donato, you reviewed this for Daily Dread, so folks can go see your review. Is it over? Do you remember which one it is?
Daily Dead.
Daily Dead. What did I say? Sorry.
You're mixing them all up together.
Yeah, you reviewed it for Fang
Bloody
Gordred.
Daily Dread.
Bloody Daily. Apologies to all the editors in chief out there.
Presented by Fangoria.
You reviewed this for Daily Dead. You've been doing a lot of really good film coverage and reviews for Daily Dead, so I encourage people to go check you out there. But if they'd like to learn more, where else do they go to see your writing?
You can find me at Donatobomb on Blue Sky, Letterboxd, and Instagram. I might dabble with TikTok more. I did end up going on a very fun trip this weekend where I spent 20 hours in New York City to get a Shudder 10th anniversary tattoo. So I made a little TikTok about that, but also post on Instagram. So you can find fun visual things on those two places. But yes, as Monagle said, my review of 28 Years Later is on Daily Dead right now. I just posted a list on Inverse. I'll have another list coming up of my favorite horror movies of the year so far on Inverse shortly. So the work is coming. We still got Megan coming out. We still got some reviews to come out. So at Donatobomb on the socials.
As for me, you can find me on social media. It's Monagle at Blue Sky. You can also find me, I guess I'm on Instagram. I'm our Monagle over there. And those are kind of the only two that I use. I have a TikTok account, but I lurk and I only use it to message funny things to you and other friends of mine. But as always, please visit certifiedforgotten.com. Sign up for our newsletter if you are in a position to and want to continue to support independent horror journalism, writer-owned horror journalism. We have monthly and annual subscriptions affordably priced. We'd love to have you be a supporter of the website. Join our Slack group. Have fun talking about, weird taste in movies, alternating pileups on Monagle, alternating pileups on Donato. It's kind of what our folks do. And be sure, if you like this episode and others, to like and subscribe and leave a review on your podcast platform of choice. Thank you for listening, everyone. Go survive those fast zombies.